So, well, I'm talking on ritual and devotion in relationship to spiritual receptivity. So that's the theme within the overall, our overall interest at the moment in ritual and myth. And as you will all have noticed, I'm speaking from the Shrewsbury Centre Shrine Room. And actually, I just feel very, very moved to be here, even though it's an empty space. But it is also the space that holds our ritual, our history of practice together, our history of devotion together. And it's still alive with a sense of that happening. So appreciate the live performance from Shrewsbury Buddhist Centre, the live talk. So, spiritual receptivity in relation to ritual and devotion. So I'm going to say a little bit about that generally, or quite a bit actually about it generally, and then move on to talking more about our experience, our direct experience around those areas. And, we were sharing our Sangha nights around spiritual receptivity right at the very beginning of the year. So you come to this evening with an understanding of it already, but I'll just remind you of one or two things. So, as we know, spiritual receptivity is part of Bante's vision of his system of practice. Part of his vision of his system of practice, and it therefore operates on what he called the horizontal level, which is the sort of day-to-day, everyday, all our practices interacting with each other, and also what he described as the vertical level, the ascending level, the aspiring level, leading right up to the transcendental. And we probably remember that spiritual receptivity is the climax of that aspiration and that ascension. Spiritual receptivity at the point where it becomes boundless, compassionate activity. So it kind of shines with its potential. And often the system of practice we call the mandala of practice. And the mandala of practice holds that sense of myth, of mystery, of the wonder, I think, of our path and of the spiritual path. But maybe in our more day-to-day terms, we think of spiritual receptivity as responsiveness, as being with our experience, feeling the particular texture of it in our being as it happens, whatever happens, and being moved, affected, shifting in our being because of that. Very recently, I was doing a solitary retreat at Taraluka, and the weather was still good enough for me to sit outside. And a lot of my practice was just being receptive to the developing beauty of the autumn landscape, being receptive to the rupa of Prajna Paramita across me in my vision, being receptive to the woodland and to the sky, and being receptive to my own feelings on the retreat, however I was, and being receptive to my love of that place. So when we move into spiritual receptivity, then we're coming to a very wholehearted response to what is happening and to how we are. I don't know that I could describe often how I was feeling, because there aren't necessarily precise words for it, and that's fine, that's enough, I didn't need them. So coming on to ritual and devotion, something we practiced together in this space for years, and now we're in the Zoom era, still practicing it, and Zoom has its obvious limitations and it has its creativity as well. But when I'm talking tonight, I'm mainly talking in terms of our practice as it has been in Triratna, as it has been in the Buddhist movement over many centuries and in many places, which is people gathering together in sacred spaces or creating sacred spaces and practicing, experiencing ritual and devotion in that context. So that is my main context as well. And I chose to talk about this particular topic in relation to the overall theme because I think a lot about ritual these days, but I don't know that I had explicitly thought about ritual in relation to spiritual receptivity. And we tend to think of ritual as active, as something that we do. So we recite words, we chant, we might beat a drum, we might shout from the top of a hill, or we might simply kneel before a beautiful shrine, light a tea light and offer it to the shrine and bow 3 times. So when we turn to receptivity in relation to that active energy, we're doing something very, very necessary and very important for the process, actually, which is being with the mythic experience and opening up to it, absorbing it, processing it, being with its aliveness, tracking the sensations in our body, the changes in our body, the shifts in our mood, the changes in our energy, and letting that experience, therefore, become more part of us, stay with us, modify our being. And that's why it's also very important, if we can, to sit, to just sit before ritual and to sit afterwards as well. So we provide a kind of framework and a context for our openness and for holding what has happened and holding that experience. So there's no need to rush off. We can stay and be receptive. There's no need probably to stand up and leave. We could say to ourselves, do I need to get up now? Do I need to? Do I really need to? And we can just stay and just be, maybe even just a sense of being in the space after the ritual, being in the atmosphere as it settles. We're very privileged because we have the Dharma, and I'll come on to that later in my speaking. There are many forms of ritual in the world. Some of them are unpleasant, some of them are worse than that. But in our ritual, we're relating to the highest human aspirations, to the transcendental. We're looking beyond. We're going to what is highest, maybe to what is deepest, and to the ultimate fulfillment of being human. So we have ritual, we have our myths in relation to that. And then we need also to have the space and the awareness to absorb that, to be with that. So this is beyond conventional knowing, beyond the narrow confines of what is fixed, categorized, defined by limited self-referential views. And because it's beyond what we think we easily know, because it transcends our ordinary experience, we need to aspire to it through an increasingly high level of our own experience. So when we look right up to our transcendental goals or to what is deepest within us, we need something on the way. And it's that middle space of deeper refinement, kind of deeper aesthetic awareness, actually, that ritual inhabits and that our receptivity enables us to experience. It's still mundane, but it's closer to the transcendental. And thus, we're aspiring through symbol, myth, poetry, beauty, a sense of theatre, through space, silence, atmosphere, imagination. You could say it's the poetry of our experience. And in ritual, our actions can flow on that level. It's like being in a work of art, and it's more than that. So it is a level of more aesthetic experience and refinement. In Dharmic terms, it's the Rupaloka, the world of pure form, and sometimes it touches on the Arupaloka, the formless realm. And it's wonderful, And we need to be receptive to the richness of this. Welcome it, take it into our being, let it touch us, move us, change us. Or we might just miss what has happened and what it so deeply means. So this could be bowing to an image of green Tara. We could be chanting the Amitabha mantra at sunset. It could be when we hold our hands in the Anjali mudra, chant the refuges and precepts, and acknowledge Shakyamuni, the Buddha who made it all possible. And we've done that many times in this room, taking account of the figure of the Buddha that sits here day and night through the passing seasons, always here, quietly beautiful. So I've used the word ritual mainly, but I want to say something about devotion, which is a word which we use less in ordinary speech. But devotion is when we experience this heartfelt response to the transcendental. Devotion arises from faith, it's rational, we test it against our understanding of the Dharma, and it is a heart response to what is higher. We feel it and we take it into our being. And then it becomes a volition. It manifests in action, it manifests in ritual, and it can be like the nectar that flows through ritual and perfumes it. It may be quite passionate. It could be chanting the Padmasambhava mantra and holding a vajra. Or it could be very delicate, sensitive, gracious, just placing a flower on a tiny shrine in the only spare corner of your house. And sometimes we don't feel very devotional, and that's okay. All of this will be held by our passing feelings, our temperament, our personality, our ways of practicing. But with ritual and devotion, my own feeling, it's really good to turn up. It's really good to come. It's good to show up. It's good to be there. And from positive actions, more that is positive consequences will follow. And there's a wonder, I think, to our spiritual progress from the ordinary, from the person of mixed moods, our aspirations, our rising to something higher. It would be pretty boring if we were perfect right from the start. And the wonder of our path is that it's about the ordinary meeting the transcendental. We can be ordinary, failing, blundering. We have good qualities as well, but we are ordinary, failing and blundering as well, and we can be enlightened. And enlightened beings have known the human struggle, therefore, as the Buddha certainly did. So I'd like to move on to the experience now. This is the second half of the talk, the experience of being receptive within the experience of ritual and devotion. So we need to be with our ritual and our devotional experiences just as they are, absorb them into our being, let them have an effect, let them change us. The last activity I led with people present anywhere was actually in the shrine room in March on what feels like a parallel evening. And on that evening, with a theme spiritual receptivity, we practiced just sitting, we were receptive. And then some of you may remember in the second half, we practiced really just being with slightly separate ritual experiences, just to get the feel of what they were like. So we heard a reading and then sat in the space after it. We chanted a mantra, just thinking, oh yes, this is what it's like. This is what it's like to chant a mantra. And then we made offerings to the shrine. Oh yes, this is what it's like. And we also appreciated our other Sangha members as they made offerings to the shrine as well, and took in what they were doing. And all the time, so what are these experiences like? What is it like? What is happening? So thinking about experience, I'd like to now move on to think about the setting, which is very much the context we've just been in. So the setting for spiritual receptivity in relation to ritual, the space where it happens are places like Shrewsbury Buddhist Centre, on a street, in a suburb, by a river, not very far from the shop or the car park or the two local pubs. So let's just be a bit with this experience. What is it like to come here to practice, to have that momentum? So you walk down the passageway, you step inside. At once you're in a different space, quietness, atmosphere, a bit mysterious, a sacred space. And you can stand still, just breathe it in, just be with what is there. Then you take off your shoes. You step into a shrine room, this shrine room. You enter this more sacred space. In this room there is a rupa of the Buddha Shakyamuni, a beautiful rupa. You know it well now. Candles, flowers. In this room there is silence, a deeper atmosphere. Just breathe it in. Receive what is there. And then you can put your fingertips together, bow, and take your place. And the shrine is not an object sitting on a piece of wood. It has a presence, a flow of energy. It has an atmosphere. It also holds the practice of the Sangha, the history of the Sangha. Devotion, ritual, meditation, whether happening here, now or not. And the shrine is nothing fixed. It's like a flow of energy in space. It's recreated. It's different in different light, different when seen from another part of the room. Just breathe it in. Just be with what is there. And more generally, a shrine can be many things. It can be a tree trunk, it can be an upturned basket, it can be a piece of metal, and it can be created for a Zoom event on a very ordinary shelf opposite a screen. Or it can appear on a screen. I hadn't been to Taraloka this year for months and months and months, for an unusually long time. And then I joined a retreat and I watched on YouTube the evening ritual coming from the Tara cabin. No, sorry, I correct myself, they're coming from the main shrine room at Taraloka. And I was just so moved to see it, I just got up and prostrated in my shrine. And so I prostrated in my sitting room to the television set, as it were, but to the Taraloka shrine. So it had that effect and it spoke to me through all the technology. I'm not planning to prostrate to a television set very often, but it was significant that evening. And we should never take this for granted. It is always a miracle to be here. It's also a miracle to be able to practice the Dharma. It's a miracle to be able to practice the Dharma on Zoom. And traditionally, we can only do this because a Buddha has appeared in our period of history. And he has taught the Dharma. And we have heard it. We've actually heard it. We've been taught it. And we are in the conditions and are able to practice it. And that makes it a very rare, very precious opportunity for anyone, whether you're in this space or in your own house. And maybe sort of hearing this, knowing this, when we know it, when we feel it, our receptivity can give rise to positive emotion, to gratitude, to fidelity, respect, humility, love, joy. It is a very precious opportunity. We also have ritual objects, and we open our hearts, we open our awareness to them as well. Ritual objects are also changing, elusive, impermanent. Vajras, candlesticks, offering bowls, double vajras. They might be very beautiful, carefully chosen, maybe beautiful because they're a bit battered, but we've come to love them. Maybe they were always ordinary, but they've taken on a spiritual presence. And we don't have to be too precious about them. So an example of that was I led a tea ceremony in Spain, and we had very good teapots, but we didn't have any delicate Japanese cups. So we used mugs from IKEA. And these 24 mugs from IKEA kind of took on a presence during the ceremony. And I remember just sort of tenderly washing them the next day as well. Many of us were in robes, there was that kind of flow, and it just all worked. We treasured them. So ritual objects hold a deeper meaning. They are themselves and they're more than themselves. They're aesthetic, evocative, symbolic of what is beyond. And when you hold a vajra in your hand, it's not like holding an ordinary object. It doesn't feel like that, and the energy is different. Our ritual ideally is with others, and again we need to be receptive and open to that experience. It's happened so often here, and I trust it will happen again. And in that situation we become more mythic. We are ourselves and more than ourselves, and our actions hold this. And we bow, we might prostrate, we make offerings. And it's good to be with that extension of our being, that extension, that growth in our spiritual flow, and also just with the physical feeling of letting go, of devotion in our bodies. We are embodying our feeling for the Buddha, our feeling for the three jewels. We are more than what we were, greater in a way than what we are, aspiring, ascending, even if a bit muddled, even if getting it wrong. There's still that potential, and there's still what we are feeling within ourselves. And so ritual is also an experience of spiritual friendship, of Sangha, and of the collective. And collectively, again, we are more, mysteriously more than the total of our individual selves. And we can feel that, take it in the flow of the connections between us. Our boundaries soften. Our individual voice dissolves into the collective voice. We recite lines in call and response, rhythmic, poetic, evoking again and again what is beyond us and transcends us, the ultimate truth, the ultimate compassion, and our reverence for it. And together we chant mantras to transcendental figures. We look up, we look beyond, and they have wonderful names. Avalokiteshvara, Manjushri, Vajrapani, Green Tara, Amitabha, Shakyamuni, Padmasambhava, and others. And when we chant like this, these aren't songs, these aren't tunes, this is spiritual sound, and it reverberates in the room, and it reverberates in our being, and we feel that, and we get to know with it. So we can just be with it, take it in, be affected by it, be moved by it. And also, as on that night here in March, we're responsive to our Sangha friends, they making offerings, knowing them well, appreciating them, just as they are, how they kneel, how they walk back, how they might stumble a bit to find their seat. And maybe we're just loving them more, just as they are. And on Zoom, and I was thinking about this, and others were talking about this on a retreat, a very good retreat I did on Zoom last week. There is a mystery there, because the huge advantage of Zoom, of course, is that we can meet with people, be with people, practice with people from across the world. And in a way, our practice can flow across deserts and mountains and big cities and to all these different places and to all these different homes. And we can feel it. We can feel an energy and an atmosphere, and we can trust it. And it's as though something is going on which is beyond the technology. And we're part of it. And it's good to be with that experience of being part of it. So finally, a little bit more about the transcendental. So I've talked about ritual mainly in terms of body and speech, but there's now also in terms of mind. So we're opening up, aspiring to the transcendental, to what is beyond us, to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, or maybe to a particular teaching, like the Heart Sutra, maybe to the Bodhisattva path as it's embodied in the Sevenfold Puja. And we're imagining, but we're imagining in a receptive way. I think this is very interesting, because we tend to think of imagination as creating, but imagination is something which contacts the deepest truth. We can't invent these things. We can't make them happen, but we can respond to what arises, be open, be receptive, dwell in the conditions for it to happen. We might be being with the images and the symbols. We might see more with our eyes closed, but maybe not that at all. But there might be a sense of presence within a recitation or a mantra, or we might just feel something in our being, a tremor in our heart, or a shift of energy, or just that sense that something is going on. Or we might not seem to experience anything in particular, but we're there, we're shown up, we're staying open to the possibilities, we're in relationship, we're ready to grow and change. And when we leave, when we step out into the room, put on our shoes, step out into the passageway, we will carry our experience with us in our being, playing itself out in our being, maybe immediately, maybe over days, months, maybe over years. And then or later or sometime in the future, our spiritual receptivity may shine forth with gratitude, fidelity, or respect, with humility, love, or joy. And sometimes, maybe in a ritual, maybe in a moment of devotion, we may even shine with a sense of wonder. So I think it's the moment when we move into breakout groups. A couple of things you might wish to discuss. I've kept the questions very simple, really. One is really, is there anything that you would take from this talk? And the other is, would you like to share a particular memory of a ritual or part of a ritual or something ritualistic that felt significant and has stayed with you? So it could be a ritual, it could be an object, it could be a shrine, it could be something that you did. So the two things to share, is there anything I take from this talk, and what has it maybe touched in my experience, where I had something in this area which felt significant for me?